There you go. So for those of you who are joining who are not Park Slope Parents members, I just wanted to tell you that we'd love you to join us. We little PSA that we're quite a large organization with over 7,300 families, that we have groups for as you get older, as your kids are on their phones more, you have more time to join the cooking group and the gardening group and the book groups and the crafting group. And we'd love you to join us. And after the presentation, and when we send out the recording, we'll send a little link to that. So we'll send you a link and stick around. And they say we're from womb to tomb, because we are there when you have your baby and there when you join the aging parents group. But we are so excited tonight to be joined by kind of the rock star. So what I would like to call the rock star, Dr. Whitlock is from the Jed Foundation, but she is so much more than just talking about the metaverse. She is a emerita research faculty at Cornell. She's founder and director of the Cornell research program on the self-injury and self-recovery. So part of me thinks we might need to ask you back to give another presentation. She focuses on strength-based approaches, including resilience and connectedness, which we're going to see is going to be really important in how we connect with our kids about their metaverse, and support social and emotional health, self-injury, suicide prevention, and the relationship between technology and well-being. I could go on and on. I am instead going to turn it over to you. Please put your questions in the chat. And we do have please put your questions in the Q&A. We will have the chat open. I think you're going to ask a couple questions and hope to get some responses. And it would be great to have you give some responses. So turning it over to you, Dr. Whitlock.
Thank you, Susan. I so appreciate it. All right, let me just go ahead and share my screen. I'm super happy to be here with you to talk about the metaverse. Starting, of course, with the question, what the heck is a metaverse, which I will get to in a moment. But first, I want to say thank you. Glad to be here. I'm sorry that Becca couldn't be here with you, but I'm very grateful that I get to be. And I've worked with her and the rest of our team on this project, so I'm happy to be able to represent it. And I know you'll put it to good use. I also mentioned to Susan at the beginning that I tried to leave a good amount of time at the end here for some Q&A, as well as because I know there's a good number of discussions or questions that I was sent in advance. And I also focus a little more on the risks than the benefits, although I will talk about that as we go along, partly because so many of the questions focused on what we should be thinking about and wondering about and keeping an eye on. And I wanted to be sure you all were equipped to sort of, what the lay of the land was when you need to be concerned, and I'll most especially focus on what we can be doing to support our children. So in addition to the professional things that Susan just mentioned, I'm also a mom to two now grown children. They're both young adults at this point, and we're all guinea pigs, right? They were definitely the front line when it came to social media and everything else. So I've had a lot of the experiences I suspect some of you are having, except they probably started a little bit later for me than they're starting for parents who had children a little bit later than I did. All right, just really quickly, the Jed Foundation, as I suspect at least some of you know, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting emotional health and preventing suicide. We partner with schools and colleges to roll out various frameworks to support the school approaches to mental health promotion and suicide prevention, including substance abuse, but not limited to that. And we also do direct service with teens and young adults through the messaging work that we do and the work we do with, Viacom and MTV and influencers, trying to help young adults and adolescents acquire the skills and knowledge they need to help themselves and each other. And then we're really interested in advancing community awareness, understanding, and action. So we do a lot of legislative promotional work in addition to everything else. Today, I really just want to talk a little bit about the landscape, the background, some of the risks and benefits of the metaverse, what you all need to know as caregivers, pass along some resources, and then I hope we can have a discussion. So here's where, I'm realizing I won't be able to see the chat. Can you see it, Susan?
I'll feed you things.
Okay, so I just want to know what you all think. Is the impact of technology on youth is, in your experience, one, largely positive, neutral, or largely negative? And Susan, if you could just, I know we don't have that many people, so maybe you could just read what you get, and if you guys could just put what you think there, we'll come back to it at the end. Is there anything in there? Susan, you just let me know what you're getting. Is there nothing in there, Susan?
Nothing in there yet. I
Okay,
like to just say both and.
both and all. Fair enough. I should have put that. Like, it's everything and above. All right, well, let's just move on. I wanted to basically circle back around that in the discussion, because it's true. It is really both and. Let's do just a little background. The youth mental health landscape, as I think a lot of you know, is a bit concerning. That age of onset for most mental health challenges is 15 to 24. So later adolescence and early young adulthood are the times where we're most likely to see symptoms appear. Depression, anxiety, and then behavioral disorders are the leading causes of illness. So by behavioral disorders, I'm talking about things like self-injury or substance abuse, or the kinds of things that you know that adolescents will do. Those are the kinds of things you're going to see. And interestingly, the majority of sort of the backbone of a lot of those disorders is emotional dysregulation. So when it comes to being able to support our kids, we really do want to be working with them around emotion, because that's what is the primary agent in a lot of the challenges that we see with young people. Suicide is unfortunately the second leading cause of death among 10 to 14-year-olds, and the third leading cause of death among 15 to 24-year-olds. And we are seeing the suicide rates increase over time. There was a little dip in 2020, I think partly because of COVID and people being at home, but the rates have continued to go up from there. And at this point, 30.6% of young adults experience at least one mental health challenge. So that's a pretty significant number of people. I was telling Susan as we were talking, I've been doing this work a really long time. I've been doing research in this area for over 25 years. And I've been working I've worked on the front lines prior to that for a good 10 years. And I have seen the challenges and the mental health burden of young people increase. And I think partially it's a response to just the increasing complexity of the environments that they grow up in. Technology is a part of that, but it's not the whole picture. So what happens when you add technology? I love this set of slides because I figure at least some of you will understand. So this was the home media ecology when I was growing up in 75. I was born in 66 and I was growing up in 75. And if you wanted to get into my house, there were 5 ways in: phone, TV, radio, mail, and newspaper delivery. The only one of those that demanded or expected bi-directional communication was the phone. The rest was just sort of when you wanted to look at it, right? Turned on the TV or read the newspaper. By 2008, there were 3 times as many ways into my home. And then at this point, it's so much that they don't even track it anymore. We basically think of it as sort of the ubiquitous computing age, the Internet of Things. That's the era that we're in now. And it's changed very rapidly and in really dramatic ways, since most of what the most communications now come with at least the expectation, or it may not be an expectation, but it's often the norm for quick response, right? Whether it's email or text or something else, there's this persistent sense of you need to engage in exchange. That's fairly novel across the arc of just, our lives, my life, the life of many adults. And we don't really know exactly what that's going to mean for our kids or ourselves over time. The metaverse is an interesting concept. So the metaverse we defined for the report as the persistent, immersive, networked digital ecosystem where people can play, create, learn, work, and socialize with others. Basically, the metaverse was the way we combined all the different things that people can do online. So social media that's interactive, social media, gaming, and then, the sort of up and coming new VR landscape. So it's basically where people go to exchange. And depending on who you are, you may go to different places. As you all know, we really are living in the digital media moment. So 95% of teens go online daily. I think that that statistic isn't all that different for adults. Most of us go online daily. A lot of us have to in order to do our work. 45% go on online almost constantly, and the amount of daily screen time, and this was as of 2019. I think it's probably gone up a little bit over the last few years, especially since COVID. But at least for tweens, it's 4 hours, almost 5 hours, and for teens, it's almost 8 hours. And this is not for school use. So that in and of itself is something for you to put in your hip pocket, because there is a relationship between the amount of time that people use the internet, especially for non-school related things, and mental health above a certain amount, which we'll talk about in a second. There are some gender differences, sex differences, and this is, I'm talking girls and boys here. We're not moving into a number of different genders or identities, because we don't really have the good data on that. But if we're going to look at just the binary, girls tend to prefer, and this is on average, lots of individual variation, but we do see it reflected in the statistics. Girls tend to prefer music, reading, TV, and social media. They tend to consume more content related to beauty, fashion, lifestyle, and DIY. And they tend to use technology for social communication more intensively, including texting, chatting, and video calls when compared to boys. Boys tend to prefer video games, console games, mobile games. They tend to consume more video content, including gaming streams and YouTube videos on various topics of interest. And they tend to use technology more for group gaming and less for personal or emotional communication. Again, averages, there's lots of individual variation, but we do see some differences in this, and therefore some differences in effects. Some youth, however, are more vulnerable than others. Young people with a history of bullying or other experiences that leave them feeling marginalized. Youth that perceive that they're isolated or they have very little in real life connection. Youth that have low self-esteem, or, and this is super important when it comes to social media, the tendency to engage in negative self-comparison. I'm going to come back to that because that's a pretty important factor. Or they have unstable or chaotic homeschool or community environments, are all at higher risk for having mental health challenges as a result of what they spend on the time they spend online. They are, however, also really they benefit greater from positive online exchanges often as well. So it is really, it's kind of a mixed bag, but it's important to know that what somebody brings to the platform, sort of what they bring there in terms of their history, does matter, especially with regards to mental health.
Dr. Janice.
Yes.
Can you tease apart how much of this we've determined is causal and how much is correlational?
You mean that between the relationship of social media or technology, the metaverse, and mental health?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of, are depressed people going on more? So you say, well, the more you're on, the more depressed you are, as opposed to being online causes you to be depressed.
Yeah. Let me come back to that in just a second, because I'm actually going to get to the research. It's a really good question, and there is an answer. So hang tight and I'll come right there. So just in terms of benefits and risk, I've got one slide on benefits and a few on risk, because like I said, I wanted us to really be aware of what to look for. But you all know, first of all, the metaverse isn't going anywhere. It's and in some ways, I think I recognize it as one pinnacle of human evolution. I mean, we've been coming here for a long time. There's a lot of intelligence and focus and creative impulses that went into making these technologies that allow us to do what we do. And they're definitely not going to go away. So it is and will become an increasingly pivotal integrated part of daily life. And the teens use the metaverse like we all do, to connect, to give and receive support, to create things, to co-create things with other people, to curate things that they like, or that they need, or that makes them feel good, to collaborate with other folks, and to get educated. I mean, it's amazing how much knowledge is available out there. And I know a lot of young people who really avail themselves of that. And there are some risks. So this gets back to the question you just asked, Susan. What does the literature say? When I say, what do we know? I'm saying, what does science know about how social media affects mental health in a nutshell? So what we find when we control for the things you just noted and other factors, when we do longitudinal studies, I mean, there've been It's not an easy thing to study, I can tell you, because first of all, it's hard to find control groups. How do you find teens who are sort of normally developing teens who don't use any technology? So in being able to tease out causality requires us to be able to, usually you have to have a control group. It's a little bit trickier with this. And there's so many other things going on and that could sort of co-occur with technology that it's tough to tease out all the pieces over time. But there's been a lot of research now over the last at least 13 years. Some of it really high quality research. And basically what we find is there's consistently a small to modest relationship between social media and mental health, meaning it's not what we expected. I think most of us expected when all this started, we expected to see that there'd be large effects on mental health. And there really isn't over the aggregate. Some of the long-term trends in mental health may be due to social media use, especially among females. So we do see that there are some factors that predispose you to a higher negative impact. So one of them is being female, sadly, because it's really through the mechanism of social comparison and envy. But social comparison is the big driver. So, and this comes out over and over and over again. So if I, as a consumer, go to the internet, even if it's unconscious, and I tend to compare myself negatively to the people that I see, and I'm following, models and makeup artists and that kind of stuff, and I'm comparing myself negatively, consciously or unconsciously, I'm more likely to have a mental health challenge as a result. That is the key mechanism. So that becomes one target, I think, for families to work with their kids, especially their daughters, and not exclusively though, around, what do they do that when they're online? Are they conscious that they're doing that? Who are they following? Why are they following them? How do they feel when they look at several Instagram feeds that all have imagery? Are they comparing themselves, or are they not? That becomes a really critical question, because that's the primary mediator. We also find, though, that there are sensitive periods. So early puberty. So for girls, it's 11 to 13, sorry. And for males, it should say 14. It should say 13 to 15. I don't know what I did there. So sorry. For males, it should be 13 to 15, females 11 to 13. And both males and females at 19. Those are sensitive periods where we do see more mental health impact just by virtue of age, which is one reason why, if you've got younger kids, younger teenagers on social media, and I know they can get online legally at 13 and a lot do much earlier than that, then it's really important to be talking with them and working with them about how they're digesting what they see and where they're going. Risk increases when there's over 3 hours of non-educational use. So prior to that, under 3 hours, we don't see a lot of effects, but over 3 hours we do. And remember the earlier slide I showed you, that kids are on way more often than 3 hours a day. When they're bringing structural or personal vulnerabilities to the platform, one of the things that's become so clear in the research is it's really what you bring to the internet that dictates what happens next, for the most part. So that's why those personal qualities and self-awareness becomes really important. And you'll see this show up again when I talked about implications. When they're exposed to harmful or distressing content, when they experience online harassment or abuse, which is unfortunately quite common, when they're already struggling with a mental health challenge, and when they have the tendency to engage in negative social comparison, which I talked about just a second ago. What we've learned about the neurological effects, because I know this was one of the questions asked, there are 4 broad areas where we are seeing impact. So we see that online activity is associated with attention, especially fracturing is the way I think of it. They're just constantly having to modulate attention. And humans we don't actually multitask. With the exception of breathing and things like that become really automatic, like driving and being able to talk, we serially toggle. So we lose seconds every single time we switch our attention from one thing to another, even though it's happening so fast, it often feels like we're simultaneously doing it, but we're not. And every time we lose a little bit of time, we're fracturing our attention. So it becomes increasingly difficult, especially for young brains that are being templated, to pay sustained attention to something. That said, we're also seen as one of the upsides, the neurological upsides of the current age, is that young people are capable of serially toggling quite effectively. They can find, collate, and integrate an extraordinary amount of information in ways that are very different than prior generations. It affects memory and information processing. So it's interesting. We've learned that using social apps to document an experience, like using your camera, actually may diminish the experience of the experience, and it may affect your memory of the event itself. So for my kids, for example, it's like, take your picture, but then put your phone away and be here, because you're gonna miss the experience of it, and you're not even going to encode it in memory in the same way. It definitely affects social and emotional response. So multiverse apps, I mean, basically all these different things we all do online are designed to be addictive. Attention is what the commodity is. And so each reward, whether it's getting a heart or a like or a comment, releases dopamine. And dopamine is a very interesting neurological chemical, because it's not, dopamine feels good. Like, we love the feeling of dopamine, but dopamine doesn't ever be sated. Dopamine's the feeling of more. Oh, that's good. I want a little more. Oh, that's good. We've all had it. It's like when you are going shopping and there's lots of cool stuff. You're like, oh, that's gorgeous. I'm going to go look and see if I can find this other thing. It's that feeling of more, but it never gets sated. It's just more. And the developers of a lot of these platforms know that, and they use it. And it's designed to deliver the dopamine to keep you going to the next thing, but you're never going to feel sated. And in fact, if you don't receive what you expected to receive, like you don't get the likes or the comments, it really can leave this sense of loneliness or sadness, this sense of deep loss. Young brains, no brain is very well equipped to deal with this, and young brains in particular know what to do with that experience. So part of what I think is important for us with our kids is to help them understand what's happening and why they feel that way and how they can withdraw from it. It's an artifact of the neurological chemicals that are released on purpose by their exchange. And then self-comparison, as we talked about, it happens naturally. We all do that, especially girls, but it really is intensified on the multiverse or in social media, for example, because you're just scrolling and there's image after image after image, and it can just leave somebody feeling so like they just can never be that. And it perpetuates a cycle of comparison that can lead to feelings of inadequacy offline too. So I'd say if you have a girl or child, just let's say girl, because it's not always that in your life, it's really good to work with them, to ask them, who do they follow and why? Who inspires them and who just leaves them feeling like they're not enough? Cull their feed. They don't need to be exposing themselves to image after image. And they do need to know that they're vulnerable to that. Knowledge is helpful. It is power. It does help our kids understand themselves and be able to behave differently. Peers really do matter, because being accepted or rejected online has big rewards, or really leaves them feeling very negatively. It really does make a difference, and the online experience of it can intensify it because it's so much more concentrated. And there's, everything is visible to everybody. It's not just 2 people that watch you be embarrassed. It's now maybe 500 people that have witnessed your shameful moment. And it can just feel atrocious to a young person and to an adult. So the online peer influence, like feedback, is disproportionately impactful. Girls are especially sensitive to pressure, and especially girls who are already struggling with their self-esteem. And then emotions and impulsivity are heightened in adolescence anyway, but you put that in a context where it's disembodied and you can be anonymous, and that you're actually sitting in your room. It doesn't feel like anything is going to happen to you, and things can get pretty out of hand right away, which I think is another thing young people need to understand. It's like putting them behind the wheel of a very, very powerful, expensive car. They need to know how to work it. And positive, I'm going to say peer influences can also be really, really positive. So there's a lot of kids who are just not well plugged in what we call, in real life. They don't have the communities that they wish they had. They don't have people that understand them or that share their experiences. And it is really lovely to be able to find communities online where you feel seen. And peers are uniquely suited to provide emotional and informational support. So, and also seeking mental health support online is common and it's often really helpful. The studies show that. And emotional support is associated with, reductions in perceived loneliness and social isolation and increased community or commitment towards and time spent with online communities. So there are definitely benefits. And then VR and AI are on the horizon. I suspect we'll be talking about some of this in the discussion. But basically, both of these are going to intensify everything a lot, especially VR, because VR is multi-sensory. It engages all sorts of senses and it sort of blocks out everything else around you. And so it makes the experience that much more impactful. So I don't know how many of you have VR headsets or kids that are engaged with VR, but please be aware, or please be talking to them about the experience that they're having online. It's not as widespread as I think Meta had hoped it would be by this point, but it's certainly going to be coming. All right, so the last segment here is what I would recommend. And I was going to do this, maybe, I don't know if we have, do we still have 2 people with us? Do we have people here, Susan?
We have 5 people.
We have 5. All right. So I don't know if you can put this in the chat. I would love to know. My family has been to establish positive media balance. And you can use these or type in whatever it's true for you, since we don't have that many people. And I'd love to hear what people are saying, Susan.
And if you can't seem to get to the chat, put it in the Q&A.
Oh, that'll work, yeah. And just read it to me when you got it.
I've got one hard, but we are managing.
Okay.
I've got another hard, but we are managing.
Good. That's better than the nearly impossible.
Okay, we have a nearly impossible.
Oh, we have a nearly impossible. Okay. Well, we'll get there and we'll have time to talk about it. So just be aware that app and privacy features do vary considerably. So like TikTok is all public, so privacy is easier to protect, but Instagram makes disclosing private details pretty easy. Discord is popular, but makes meeting other people that you may not be in your network very easy. So I think one of the primary take-home messages for parents, even though from a parent perspective, I remember like, oh no, do I really have to get to know these apps that I'm really not that interested in? It's really helpful if you at least understand the basic way they work and where your child's information goes, and then work with your child to be sure that they really understand how not to share private information. They may not know that what they just shared about what they did is actually cluing somebody into where they live, for example. So they just need to be conscious of that, which means you need to be conscious of that. Many of the platforms are image-based, so sending pictures is really easy for, it's great in some ways, it's not good in other ways. Youth really need to know, don't send a picture, especially, I'm talking mostly a sext. They should assume somebody is recording, even if it's ephemeral. They should assume that they can take a picture of it. It's just not a good idea if they, and if they do send a sext, the best advice is don't include their face. I think that's kind of strange, but anything that can identify them is going to be potentially problematic for them down the road. Yeah, be aware that VR and avatars are coming to a headset near you, which is just unfortunately going to make some of these already complicated politics online a little even more difficult. We can talk about that more if we want. And then predatory behavior is most common in roadblocks and other gaming apps. Safety basics, stay aware of and educated about platform features. I just said that. Where are they going? Sorry, I should say they going. Where are your kids going? Where do they like to be? And who are they interacting with? If you can engage with them for a little bit, so you get a sense of sort of how they move around and who they engage with, it'll help you understand this. Who are they meeting? Anyone they talk about or feel connected to? Ask about them. Where did they meet them? Are they online? Where are they online? What do they know about them? Can you Can you, watch or be with them or see some of the things that they've exchanged, just so you have a sense of, if this person is saying they're a 14-year-old boy, they're actually a 14-year-old boy. How many other places do they talk to that person? Is it just one platform, or is they talking across platform? If they're talking to the same person that you don't know across platforms, then you should learn more about the nature of the relationship and who this person is. And then understand where it is happening and what has been asked and shared, what features they are and aren't using. I think this was really very much about where is the exchange happening? What have they done? What have they said? What have they given? And then use parental control features to know, but know that they're pretty easy to work around. Yeah, so parental control features are really good, especially with your younger teens, but you really should know that they're actually pretty easy to work around as people get older, which is one of the reasons why education and open communication in your family is probably going to be the best avenue to pursue. Help youth understand their attention is the product. They need to make technology work for them, not become beholden to technology. When they use it as a tool and not just as a passive scrolling device, it'll be easier for them to be in charge. They should be mindful of what head and heart space they're in when they engage. Not a good idea if they're feeling like they've had a lousy day and their self-esteem is crushed, to go look at a bunch of images that are going to make them feel worse. So they should be mindful about where they go and what they're doing when they're in a low space. And then they all need to know how to have device-free time to be balanced and healthy. So it's really helpful if you can do it as a family. And there are tools actually you can use to help with this. And I'll talk about that in a second. I don't know if I wish I could see you. I don't know if you know what nomophobia is. If you know what nomophobia is, can you write yes in the chat? Actually, I think it's right here. I put it on here. Forget it. Don't do that, because now I see that it's already on there.
I didn't know if that makes you feel any better.
That's good. I did not know what nomophobia was till several years ago. Nomophobia is something I think we all have to some degree. It's the irrational fear of losing or not having access to one's phone. I mean, a shockingly high number of young people, and not just young people, in a study said that they'd rather lose a pinky than be without their phone. So we need to be able to help them battle the feelings. And some people get really anxious, like their heart will pound, like they'll start to sweat. They have, classic anxiety attack feelings of being without their phone, because the phone becomes a proxy, a stand-in for connection. That's part of it. So they need practice in not constantly and not forging that connection, because it's not true, right? That your phone is connection. You can have connection a lot of different ways. So if, as a family, if you guys can all spend time regularly without your phones, like at dinner, or maybe like in my life, just my personal life, Saturday is a device-free day. I almost never, I will check my device a couple times a day in case there's something I need text-wise, but I don't go online otherwise pretty much at all. Actively promote and teach digital literacy. And in the resources section, I have some great resources for doing that. I would resist social media accounts until somebody's 13. I know it's sometimes really hard. There's a lot of pressure, but it really is a good idea if you can make it that long. And if you can, forge digital use agreements to go along with devices. These should be agreements, better than like thou shalt contracts. But if you can forge it with your child, here's what we are agreeing to when I give you this device, and they sign it and you sign it, and and be thoughtful about what you include. Make sure you have some like device-free time in there, for example. It can be very helpful. And you need to model behavior. This is the hardest part for all of us, because we tell our children we shouldn't be online a lot, but then we're busy checking our phones or our computers or whatever it is a lot. Then we're actions really do speak louder than words. They really, really do. So we have to sort of model what we would like them to be doing. And then connect and engage rather than punish. So when something happens, let's say a sex dissent, you find out, not good, rather than getting angry and creating tension and potentially a power struggle, the best strategy is this sensibility. So, all right, so you've done something you regret. Let's figure it out together. You want to keep that connection as long and as strong as possible. Because when the really hard stuff happens, you want to be the people they go to. And I'm not going to read all these. And I have 2 pages of conversation starters. These are all really good. I just put them in here because I want you to have all of them. These are all really great ways to open conversations with young people. They're open-ended. It asks their opinion. I think you can pick, anything here or modify, create one of your own, and start and continue having conversations over time. And things change as they age. So it's really interesting to say, this is what you thought a year ago. How are you feeling about this now? And here's the other set of starters. All right, and then this is just resources. Common Sense Media is one of my favorite go-tos. If you've got questions, go there. If you want resources for your family or resources for your child to be able to read, they've got all sorts of stuff there. Our Metaverse report, Jed, but then there are a number of other places I put here too that have lots of resources. And there are some really good digital literacy tools. This is just one social media test drive. I put it here because I co-created it with some colleagues at Cornell a while ago, but there's a number of them coming out, and there really is, like, before you go online, before you get your social media account, let's test drive it. Let's go practice how this looks. Let's practice how privacy settings work, and let's talk together about how we can set it up so that that'll fit the best for you. That's it. And then we can have a conversation now. Thank you.
So I wanted to interject a little bit. I guess I should get back on. So I teach this class in interpersonal communication, a grad class at NYU. And I only did it once, but I had a box. And I said at the very first class, I took their phones and put them in a box.
Yeah.
And to see the level of angst, that nomophobia, the level of angst. And, I think one of the most important points that you make in this is our own behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like somebody it has a small child, and there's a video I show in class about how we use media. And if you're on your phone with your children, basically, if they're doing something, they're saying, "Daddy, look," or they're asking a question, if you continue to look at your phone, you are telling them whatever is on my phone is more important than you are.
That's right. Exactly.
And that really struck me. It's like, oh, but I need to answer this text right now because somebody's waiting on something. You're telling your child you're not as important as my phone.
Right. And you're also modeling that it's okay to communicate to somebody who's with you, that they can wait. I mean, I think it's really about communication, because you can say to a child, "Sweetie, I'm going to finish this text right now, and then I will talk with you." Like, just communicate what you're doing. Let them know that it's not going to be forever. But I don't think that we need to set everything down when we're in the middle of something, right? Too, because that's also not communicating good boundaries too. We want them to be able to be patient and wait their turn and all that kind of stuff. It really is about communicating, and then of course not spending a bunch of more time after they're trying to get your attention, ignoring them.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think of Behind Their Screens? Have you seen this book?
Yeah, I have. I haven't read it though. What do you think of it?
Well, what I like about it is it talks about the social, because it's what teens are facing and adults are missing. And I do think it's easy for us to say, take your phone out of the room. I mean, this is something that Lisa D'Amour says, and she says you shouldn't have your phone and your kids shouldn't have their phone in their bedroom. And I agree with that, but at a certain point, I've just known some of my daughter's friends who end up, like my friend's having an emotional crisis. If I'm not there for them, I'm not sure what will happen. So for them, that is a lifeline. That phone becomes a lifeline to a good friend who they want to stay safe.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, and it's really important. I know I love the ideal of being able to have totally phone-free zones, especially around bedtime, is good. It's a good ideal. It's good to shoot for. I think a lot of young people feel concerned, and adults, right, about not having their phone in a different room. I remember as a parent, it was especially when my kids were out, it's well, I want to have my phone at least in my room, because if because I don't like it on ring. I like it on buzz, and I need it where I can hear in case they're calling me.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the challenge is, they use it up until they fall asleep with it. It might be right next to them, right next to their head. That's not a good idea. So being able for them to create a routine where there's, a half hour, ideally an hour before they wind down and sleep, where their phone is not present, they're not actively engaged. If there's a crisis, then they respond to a crisis, but otherwise they learn to just ignore it. Like, for example, they can turn the phone all the way off and maybe check it once just to make sure nobody's having a crisis, and then leave it off until the morning time. It's when it's laying in bed next to them, buzzing left, right, and center, that is extraordinarily unhealthy.
Yeah.
And sleep is one of the things we're noticing the greatest challenges in. So, and sleep has a lot to do with mental health too.
Yeah. Somebody asked in the Q&A, are there any tools or things we can do early on in childhood to help manage self-comparison?
Well, I think the answer to all of this is, unfortunately, we've created a world and we've created technology that is asking our young people to be mature much earlier than they would otherwise need to be. So they have to learn to self-regulate. They have to learn how to monitor their emotions. They have to learn to monitor what I call red flag feelings. So when you're scrolling and you start to feel that yuckiness, like you're not feeling good anymore, catch it early and turn it off. Like that, those are just the tools that they're going to have in order to navigate this landscape. So to the extent that you can, so self-comparison is a tough one because we live in a world that is just loaded with messages about value and beauty. And I don't see any way around that. You can definitely give your kids all the things that we need to give them, but they're going to go out in that world, and it's not just online, it's everywhere, and it has been going on for decades, maybe more, probably longer, and they're going to get that message. So talking to them about it, especially as they're approaching their teen years or they're in their teen years, because they can have great self-esteem and not socially compare, and then they can hit 13 and it's totally different, right? So just if you can keep your finger on that pulse, and then validate for them that it's really normal to have those feelings. There's nothing wrong with having those feelings, but it's not true about them. Ultimately, in the end, as you go through life, what you look like, it's just not going to matter nearly as much as you think it does, even if it feels that way right now. And then how can we create together? Can you work with them to help them pick out people and accounts and stuff to follow that make them feel good? Because helping them, well, I guess you were talking about younger kids, but helping them to recognize when they're having a feeling or comparing themselves to somebody that's making them feel bad, versus when they're comparing themselves and it's like making them feel like, yes, I want to be able to do that. I want to be as good a skater as that. And it's inspiring them. Those are very close emotions, and they often don't quite know the difference. But you can work with them kind of early to sort of know what it feels like inside them. That would be what I would advise. Self-awareness is the ticket here.
When my kids were young and we were at the doctor's office, I would pick up a magazine and I would flip through it and I would say, what are they selling? And so it's a Harper's Bazaar magazine and it's a commercial for perfume, but it's, lusty and sensual, and it's like
right.
really selling. And then sometimes you couldn't figure it out. It's like
one of my favorite TV games is to turn off the volume on commercials and see if we can figure out what they're selling, because it isn't always clear. It's like, I think they're selling a body.
Yeah.
Even
showing them like the photos of, Alicia Keys got a lot of kudos for being on The Voice and not having tons of eyelashes and tons of makeup. There's other issues about it because she was selling, face products, but it was that she didn't have to be done up all the time. This is her true beauty. So modeling, I've been, I've got two girls, trying to model those kinds of behaviors, and it can get really hard when they see so much.
Yeah, it is really hard. And helping them understand, what how things get curated and processed. Like a lot of the images that they see online are not real. They're doctored. A lot of them young people just don't know that. It seems so obvious to us, but they don't know. So it's really helpful for them to understand that a lot of what you see, especially if it feels like it's perfect, has been excessively doctored.
Yeah.
Can help them, feel. And then mostly I think they just need to not expose themselves to it over and over and over again. It's like when I was young too. I remember thinking Killing Us Softly. Remember that video? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was that when we started to get educated about advertising. And it was helpful to understand that this product is being attached to something that has, high value. And I was processing it without even realizing it.
And because there was also Still Killing Us Softly.
Right.
And
there's the one on tight buns, and remember that one? It was about men in advertising. I can't remember the name, but it was funny.
I know that there was, Axe body spray got a lot of like, oh, these are horrible commercials. And so then Dove ended up, saying protect your kids from all these different messages about, and then they showed all the Axe body. They're both owned by Unilever. So it's, you don't realize that the umbrella organization is talking out both sides of their mouth. So, so just being aware and being literate, media literacy is so important to know where you're coming from, where is this coming from? Who's making money off those eyeballs?
That's it. I mean, I don't think most people understand, most adults understand that actually the commodity that's bought and sold online is your attention. And that's, I meant to put this on the resource sheet, but I didn't. If you, as a family, you can watch the documentary The Social Dilemma. It's really interesting. And I do recommend, actually, one of the things to do is to watch movies with each other or as a family. And if there's a tech related theme, which is like ubiquitous these days, to have conversations about how it, whatever the themes that came up in the movie are, is going to be helpful. Yeah.
I wanted to underline 3 times. We can't multitask, and neither can our kids.
Yeah.
But there is this sense of I'll do it all and I'll scroll back and forth, and I just loved when you said that.
Yeah, the fracturing is really important. I mean, everybody feels it. I think it's one of the reasons all of us are kind of suffering. It's just, we fracture ourselves all the time because we're losing not just time, we're losing some sense of continuity and coherence every single time we switch attention.
Yeah. Is there a difference between I'll see my kids scrolling through Instagram and liking every single one of their friends? They might not even scroll through the 10 pictures, but they want to give that the little heart, want to give that little. And so you mentioned the difference between friends and the peers and that connection and the connection to nobody. Yeah.
So what's the question? Is there a question?
I actually asked one actually.
It's true.
Is there because I think you said it on the next slide, there is a difference between that peer connection of people who are important in their lives and those of the unknown.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, humans are born to connect. Like it's really fascinating because the very earliest, the brain studies that we've done of, young infants show, and just the social studies we've done show that humans, the first thing we do is look to connect with other humans. It's the deepest impulse that we have. We're herd animals, basically. And so when we feel disconnected, we feel really unsafe, which is one of the reasons why that part of what social media does is kind of push that you're going to be alone, thing going, it drives us. We don't even really know what it is. So I think, probably a lot of young people are getting social needs met in not unhealthy ways online. It's really good for them also to be getting their social needs met. with
Yeah.
in real life. So connection, but yeah, you're going to see the most panic around the feelings of disconnection. So if you can speak to that, you can remind them, honey, you have friends, the people will love you. They'll be there tomorrow. It's like, if you could speak to the need for connection and the concern that happens around the disconnection at the basic level, it can help, because that's what's really going on.
And be the house that has the sleepovers.
Yeah, that helps. That helps. Exactly.
So
And good snacks.
good snacks. Let me just make sure somebody said, just want to thank you. This was very useful. About to do bedtime with my kids. We were on with Joyce DeFlida, who runs NYC School Help, to help kids get into, apply to middle school. And, she says one of the best times to read with your kids is when they're teenagers. So
Yes.
dark, tweens and teens. And if you get
Yes.
to that routine, get back into that routine, because it's connection. And many times your kids will say things in a slightly darkened room with one little light on the book. They will say things to you that they wouldn't say at the dinner table. It's kind of when they're in the back seat and you're driving and you're not, let's have a talk. Let's have a talk. And so it's not so scary to like connect because I'm in the back seat. So,
yeah, and you can also text them too. So I learned two things from my daughter. One is that we can have text conversations where she wouldn't necessarily want to sit face to face, partly because it was just not as charged. And then I could ask her, and I asked her just one question at a time. Parents out there, both my children schooled me, Mom, you write books. And I'm like, all right, 3 sentences, guys. It's not, but to them, it's too much. So I learned to just chunk it into one question and then kind of wait, and she could digest. But I will, back to the reading piece. I think that's super important, because I did that with my daughter. It wasn't always at night, but I picked out 3 books for us to read that we'd agree is mostly for her. It was like women's history, all nonfiction. What's it called? Historical fiction of some sort or another. She really loved that. But to this day, she's almost 26 years old. She asks me to come over across town and read to her. She loves it. It is just, I can feel, she just relaxes. And the sound of, my voice reading to her and us just being, it is really, I couldn't ever have imagined it would have made such an impact on her.
Yeah. And you have made an impact on us. That's a great segue. Thank you so much. Very digestible. We will send out a recording. Will you share the slides, or do you just want me to?
Yeah, no, I'll share. I'll make a PDF and send them to you.
That would be amazing. There was a 13 to 15 to change.
Yes, I will fix that. Thank you. And there was a V that should be a they. I'll fix both those things and send it to you.
There was also one more resource that you were going to add, but to the
was it the movie?
Yeah. Yes. So
okay, okay, I'll do that right now. So
it is all about connection, whether it's through the phone, whether it's face to face, whether it's on Zoom. I appreciate you. I love that you were able to join us tonight, and keep doing the good work. You're kind of a rock star, and
thank you, Susan.
We may call you back if
you're more than welcome. I'm happy to help you all. Thank you so much for the important things that you're doing in raising your children, and just the work you do in the world.
Excellent. Okay, take care.
All right, bye.